because if lots of people losing the chat box, it can undermine accessibility for some people, but you can send questions directly for me and we'll have opportunities for people to send questions in later on. So this is the report back from the third full national executive meeting since the November NEC elections. Now, what we are doing in Momentum is after each NEC meeting, we're having a report back to your elected representatives, what they've been up to on the NEC, how it's going, what's happened in the most recent meetings, because we want yourselves, the Momentum members and supporters, to understand what is happening on the NEC. We want you to understand what the Momentum-backed candidates are doing and how they are holding the leadership of the Labour Party to account. Now, this time, for the first time on one of these calls, we've got Ellen Morrison. Ellen Morrison is the disabled members representative on the NEC. Ellen was elected in quite a groundbreaking result, really, in November. She got such a high vote in the members section, and she won it by just a whisker. So Ellen's going to be talking to us about disabled members' rights in the party and what she has been doing to advance those. We'll start with Ellen, and then after that we're going to have Mish Rahman, who's going to talk a little bit about the most recent NEC meeting, which was on Tuesday. And then after that, we're going to have opportunity for people to send in questions to me, and we can put those questions back to Ellen and Mish. So Ellen, do you want to take it away?
Great, thanks, Rachel. So hi everyone, I'm Ellen Morrison. I was elected in November as the first ever representative for disabled members on Labour's NEC. Thanks to Momentum for having me do this report back today. I really appreciate the opportunity to feed back to disabled members. And although it's being hosted on Zoom, this is also being live streamed, so it should be available to watch back after for any disabled members who are interested. Rachel, can I just check, is my sound okay?
Your sound is fine. I was just wondering, can we change the spotlight so that it's spotlighting Ellen? Okay, that's good. And
great. So yeah, unlike other representatives on the NEC, this is the first time that anyone has ever done this role. So there wasn't really any blueprint, and there's also no job description. I went in with a number of priorities for disabled members, having consulted with a range of deaf and disabled members, both as part of my campaign, where I heard from hundreds of members, as well as since I've been elected, and disabled members emailing me in with their experiences, questions, and concerns. So the role is really as much or as little as you make of it, and there's definitely a lot to be done. As many of you will know, it's not an altogether positive picture for disabled members in the party. For years, disabled members' major battle has been simply to try and access the party. There was a document produced in 2017 by Disability Equality at Labour called "It's Our Party, Let Us In," which I think really expresses the situation. We've long been shut out from having equal access to meetings and events, let alone be able to participate as non-disabled members do. So there was a lot of, oh, is there some background noise there? Okay. So there was a lot of work to be done coming into the role. So I'll try and cover off some of the main things I've done since I was elected in November. So firstly was grappling with the accessibility of being on the NEC itself. And it will come to no surprise that one of the first things any disabled person has to do when taking part in a new organisation or space is to fight for the access we need before we can get to really changing things. And Labour's NEC has been no exception to that. Meetings have historically always been in person, sat on uncomfortable chairs around big tables, with meetings notoriously lasting hours without regular breaks. And the pandemic has meant meetings have been done remotely, but still the long hours and lack of breaks continued to be an issue. So from my first ever meeting, and in most meetings since, I've had to reiterate my access needs. And in general, it's things that would likely benefit everyone and come with good practice for any organisation, like sending papers a week in advance, so there's plenty of time to read it over. Ideally, I would have liked all my focus so far in meetings to have been on scrutinising papers and raising issues, but I've had to repeatedly raise where things haven't been accessible to me. And despite a couple of really helpful staff members, I think there's a way to go before I have the support I need to do the role as best I can. And as the first disabled members representative, I wanted assurances that both current and future NEC members would have our access needs met. We need an NEC that both reflects society with a proportion of disabled members and an NEC culture where the accessibility of the roles are the first thought and not an afterthought. So at my first NEC meeting in November, we were given a new NEC terms of reference to consider, which sets out how we work as an NEC and how party staff facilitate us in fulfilling our duties. And one of my first acts on the NEC was to amend those terms to include a clear commitment from the party that NEC members' access needs would always be met in full. I hope ensuring that many disabled NEC members who may come after me will have an even better chance of having their voices heard and making an impact on how our party is run. So up next, one of the priorities has been to establish support for ensuring that meetings are accessible to members. Remote meetings had already become an accepted standard when I first started on the NEC, as the party responded to social distancing and lockdown requirements as part of the pandemic. We had also been through 2 different voting systems so that voting could happen as with in-person meetings, with a non-voter now becoming the standard practice for local parties. And I know that remote participation isn't for everyone. However, its acceptance and utilisation has been a sea change for many disabled members. And I ran on a campaign pledge to ensure those gains aren't taken away from us. So at our very first meeting, the NEC Away Day, I was pleased that there was widespread support across the NEC for the benefits of remote meetings, improving access for tens of thousands of members who may have faced insurmountable barriers in the past. There was even a commitment from members to look into hybrid meetings after the pandemic to see how the benefits of remote and physical meetings could be combined. And I have to say that this surprised me as someone who had advocated for remote participation prior to the pandemic and just not been listened to. And to be very frank, the fact that we've only seen remote participation become the norm as a result of the demand from non-disabled people after disabled members had been ignored for so long is a straightforward example of disablism and discrimination, which too often sees our access needs set aside. And that's why it's now absolutely vital that we make sure the gains we've made on remote participation aren't abandoned as the restrictions end, as I don't doubt institutionally the party will want to return to normality, i.e. the exclusion of many disabled members, unless we fight to keep it. And this issue was raised at the most recent NEC meeting, where a paper was brought to us to agree that restrictions preventing physical meetings would end on the 31st of July. And that was with very little safeguards to protect remote participation. Apart from a vague commitment, we would consider rule changes at the next conference. I introduced an amendment to set out in black and white the benefits that have been brought for some disabled members as a result of remote participation cannot be eroded, and that we will fully investigate methods for continuing remote participation in party activity well into the future. And I spoke with members from across the NEC, CLP reps, trade union reps, and members across all factions to win widespread support for the amendment, which was then accepted by staff. And I know how many of us rely on remote participation now to take a full part in party activity. And I just want to assure everyone that I won't let the matter drop if the party try and renege on that pledge. And just to reiterate, I also know that remote participation isn't ideal for everyone. And that was why my amendment proposed a proper exploration into hybrid meetings so that we can try and find some ways of participating that work for us all. So something else that has happened is we managed to achieve the creation of a new disability working group. There's been an NEC Women's Committee for many years, but for some reason, some equalities groups have never had their own. And I think it really is about time we had the chance to look at the issues that affect us, from access issues to participation in policy making to disablism. And this had support from across the NEC Equalities Committee. And once we get going, one of the first things I want to look into is the creation of a code of conduct on disablism. The party, in theory, has accepted the social model of disability as it was in the manifesto, but there's a real lack of awareness when it comes to the language. And we're still not free from the sort of disablist attitudes that are rife at all levels of the party. So if Labour is to become the party of government, we need to get our own house in order first, so that there's clear understanding and prioritisation of fighting to break down the barriers that disable us within the party and our movement, so that we can be trusted to do that in wider society. I also wanted to talk today about the exciting Sheffield pilot that we've had agreed by the NEC. And like with everything I'm mentioning today, these are all wins that have come directly from our disabled members. And in Sheffield, one local disabled member spent 2 years getting a motion through their local party and local campaign forum, and then onto the NEC. So as part of this pilot, in the next cycle of elections in Sheffield, disabled candidates will benefit from a change in the selection procedure, hopefully giving disabled candidates a better chance of being selected and then standing for council. And then if this pilot works and it does increase representation for disabled candidates, there was a lot of support from NEC members to see it rolled out elsewhere. And this motion came to the organisation subcommittee of the NEC. And just to say that generally motions like this aren't really taken up. They're kind of sent to us to consider. They're mostly just noted. But it was such a good idea, we were able to persuade the rest of the NEC, after various legal checks, that it was doable. So I'm obviously very keen to see how it works, and I'm really pleased we could take a motion from a member and put it into action. We have also begun work to implement the democracy review changes to establish new disabled members structures, which was an issue that I stood on in my election. And I'm pleased to say the party is making progress with. So for this, there's a separate working group, the Disabled Members Structures Working Group. And we've only been able to have one meeting so far because pretty much everything was put on hold for the locals. So I'm very much looking forward to getting to work on it over the summer. And the democracy review promised that we would have proper structures, national committee, conference, and even regional committees for the different equalities groups. And I think it's vital for the changes that we need to see in the party that disabled members are able to properly self-organise. We are strongest when we work together. And while it's great that we finally have a seat at the table, I'm still only one person, and we could do a lot more with an organised group of us working together through democratic structures. And I can't wait for that to happen. So expect to see more on this in the future, basically. And finally, something else to report back is an issue where I want there to be more transparency for all members. And that is how equalities data is used and was collected. So to explain, the building blocks of the equality structures I mentioned in the democracy review were always going to be local branches, BAME, women's, disabled, LGBT, and they have now been put through into the party rulebook. And I understand in some CLPs, they're already being set up, which is brilliant. And the idea was that these would function similarly to the geographical branches that local Labour parties already have. with similar levels of autonomy and the right to do things like send motions and delegates. And as you would expect for any liberation group, we need to be able to self-organize in our own spaces. So in order to achieve this, as well as the election of my role and the role of NEC BAME rep, it was decided that there would be a survey sent out to collect the data necessary for the party to contact its BAME and disabled members. Because with youth and women's data, that was something we already know and hold, and LGBT Labour wanted to be kept exempt from data collection. So this data was collected and used for mine and Carol Sewell's election, who is the BAME rep on the NEC. But around the same time, GDPR law came in, and I can only imagine, for the reason that it may not have been properly thought through, the permissions used on this data were apparently very limited. And as a result, we may not be able to use it for running local disabled members or BAME branches. Sorry. We may also be prevented from using it for these structures at all. And we definitely can't use it for further things like conducting access surveys, which was something that disabled members were told that this data could be used for. So essentially, we've collected data on approximately 17,000 disabled members and 17,000 BAME members, and we can only use this data for internal elections to the NEC and to other bodies like the Young Labour Committee. But somewhat ridiculously, it would be legal for local parties to hold their own data on BAME and disabled members, but local parties can't have access to the national data. And this data is still being collected without any changes to the permissions, and there doesn't seem to be any impetus to rectify this. So from where I'm sitting, it's a bit of a disaster. We need to use that data if we want to have a truly autonomous, self-organized equality structure at both a local and national level. And it damages our efforts to make the Labour Party the progressive and inclusive place it needs to be. And it leaves new disabled members branches totally reliant on their local CLP secretaries in order to contact members. And that's not appropriate for us as CLP disability officers, and it isn't fair on CLP secretaries who would be expected to email out on behalf of every equalities officer in the CLP. So we need a better solution to this. So if you're interested in helping me challenge it, please email me at ellen4nec@gmail.com, and we'll keep pushing the party to sort out a solution. There are lots of ways for organisations to be able to manage data in accordance with the law and in line with sensitivities required for personal data, but this isn't an insurmountable problem. Okay, so actually finally this time, I wanted to report back on the question I put to Keir at our NEC meeting on Tuesday, based on the number of concerned emails that I'd received from members, wondering if our leader is still committed to disabled members as he pledged ahead of his election. And I quoted the figures of the losses of disabled members at a considerably higher rate than non-disabled members over the past year, which is something that's obviously worrying. And also to raise some previous quotes from Rachel Reeves, who he recently promoted to Shadow Chancellor. But in her brief as Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions between 2013 to 2015, she made comments such as, "We are not the party of people on benefits. We don't want to be seen, and we're not, the party to represent those who are out of work." She also said, "We are tough and will not allow people to linger on benefits." I asked him to clarify that this is not a position Labour will ever take again, explaining it would go a long way to making clear that we absolutely are a party that welcomes and celebrates disabled people and benefit claimants, and that we have zero tolerance for the discrimination and disableism which continues to blight our party. And also how important it was that that was communicated from both our leader and new Shadow Chancellor in order to help us re-establish the trust of the many disabled people who don't feel confident that Labour is the party for them. And Keir's answer was, "I'll give you my 100% commitment on disabled members. We need to engage them more than before using some of the techniques we've used over the last 14 months. And unfortunately, he didn't come back on the point about Rachel Reeves and whether we are the party of benefit claimants. So that's something I will pursue clarification on. So I think that's the main points I wanted to cover today. Thanks for listening to all of that. And obviously there is a lot more I could touch on, and this will all be posted on my website. And apologies to anyone who has been eager to see the written reports from me. I'm nearly there with compiling them all. It's been a bit of a difficult time balancing the inaccessibility of the role with making sure I don't miss any meeting or opportunity to represent disabled members. But I'm pleased to say I've been at every full NEC meeting, every equality subcommittee, every organisation subcommittee, disputes meetings. I've sat on a couple of disciplinary panels, and I've just generally made sure that disabled members are considered at every opportunity. And I definitely haven't sat quietly at the table. I've made sure I have contributions prepared for every meeting on issues that particularly affect us as disabled members. So I think I've gone on for way too long now, and it's probably time to hand over to Mish. But before I do, I just wanted to thank Momentum for ensuring that there was BSL interpretation today. This is really something that we need the party to provide so that all elected representatives on the NEC and other bodies can report back to members. But while we wait for that to happen, thanks for hosting this as a live stream so that it's available for anyone to watch back in their own time. And I think there'll be time for questions after Mish reports back. But if there is anything you would like to raise with me directly, please do email me at ellenfornec@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ellen. Should we go directly to Mish? In the meantime, if people want to ask questions, send them. You can send the questions in to me directly.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Ellen. I'd like to take this opportunity to say that how much of a brilliant champion Ellen is, and how much of a great voice for advancing disabled members' rights on the NEC she is, as she continues to get those wins for our disabled members. I'd like to thank her for her efforts on the NEC and everything that she does. I think, as you all know, as Ellen said, the full NEC met on the 25th of May. And this meeting was, in my opinion, definitely more positive than previous meetings in terms of getting business completed, as Ellen reported, and also working more collegiately as well. The leader of the party, Keir Starmer, came out with his report, and he started off his report by laying out a 5-point plan. The 5-point plan included the following: the change to the economy, public services, world-class education, radical devolution, and culture. On change to the economy, he said that we must change the economic model to challenge inequality, and we must move from a shorter model to a longer-term model with high investment, and we must have the courage and conviction to tackle that. In terms of public services, he asked for a change to the public services, and he also admitted that the health and public services needed better investment and better delivery. In terms of world-class education, he asked for world-class education and skills, a skills agenda that speaks to the future and improves the focus to those that are leaving school at age 16 and 18. And in terms of radical devolution, he talked about moving power out of Westminster and more regional plans and the power resource of skills and plans for decisions that are closer to the ground. And finally, in terms of culture, he said that the politics of division have to change. He said we cannot continue with division, and he emphasized more need for unity, empathy, solidarity, and the need to come out of division. He did emphasize that he's been making these 5 points quite regularly over the last 12 months or so, but unfortunately, nobody seems to be picking up on them. So we had an elections update following the disastrous Hartlepool by-election. In the forthcoming org subcommittee meeting, the Hartlepool analysis is going to happen in more detail, but Starmer stated that we shouldn't forget in 2019, we won, and if it wasn't for the Brexit Party, we would have lost in 2019. Now, I don't agree with that analysis, as in my opinion. Not all Brexit voters were Tory, and in 2015 and 2017, there was a significant UKIP vote, and Labour still increased their majority in 2017. In the report from the leader and deputy leader on their work since the last NEC, we discussed where Labour was successful and what we need to win a future general election. And the NEC members asked a range of questions from Keir's commitment to his 10 pledges. I specifically asked the question, with your plan for devolution for power, what are your thoughts on the success of Preston, the Preston model, and places like Salford, where they champion community wealth building, which in my view, if replicated everywhere, would have improved at least 3 of the 5 subjects that you raised today, such as culture, service, and economy. I also asked him about the Labour Together report, which he mentioned, and that included the community organising and community organising units is vital. I asked him, when is the community organising unit coming back? And I also asked him finally about his 10 pledges, whether he's forgotten about them or he's ditched them, because his commitment to them had been extremely disappointing so far. Other grassroots voice 5 comrades asked about our council defeats. They asked about the demoralisation of activists. They asked about Palestine, and they asked about the whip being restored to Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, Keir Starmer gave a strong endorsement of the Preston and Salford model in the NEC meeting. And I also have had recent discussions with the new party chair, the person reviewing policy, Annalise Dodds, prior to the meeting, and she was also positive about this. So I look forward to seeing this implemented. However, I am concerned right now that the late leadership haven't once said anything or tweeted anything about the community wealth building models. Regarding my questions to Keir about the community organising unit coming back, as he commended them in the Labour Together report, he did. I didn't, and regarding whether he's forgotten or ditched his 10 pledges, I didn't get an answer to those questions. According to Keir, there was also no such thing as demoralised activists. Apparently, the party's made higher number of contacts than ever before. Apparently, I'm assuming this is on dialogue, although it wasn't clarified. Apparently, people were doing 12-hour shifts on the telephones, and people were giving everything they could. And Labour First's Luke Akehurst also mentioned that apparently record numbers of activists turned out to support him in Oxford. In the deputy leader's report, Angela had to memorise all her new titles. This is what she said, and it took her a while apparently. And she also supported the fact that the identity politics wasn't something that's supportive, that we need to move out of the politics of division. And she emphasised the need of reconnecting with the voters that we lost and looking at a vision with working class communities, with a new deal for workers and getting a better work-life balance, a better family life, and more well-being and a well-being economy. She also emphasised the need for the employment bill to change, and she also endorsed the Preston model and the Salford model and the tone of the policies we offer, including implementing the Lammy review as well. The General Secretary reported on a number of issues, including the Ford inquiry on the Labour leaks documents. He said there's currently an investigation from the Information Commissioner's Office, which Ford believes publishing his report with prejudice. We were assured that once the ICO investigation is finished, the Ford inquiry will be published. We will continue to push on this until the inquiry is published. We will ask for the Ford inquiry to be on the NEC agenda for every meeting until it is. Our colleague and comrade Gemma Bolton has sent a list of questions to the General Secretary regarding a letter sent to the party by Ford, and we believe that members deserve justice and we should continue to press on this. Keir Starmer did say that, and I quote, nobody wants the Ford report to come out more than me, so we'll continue to press him on that. We also were reported that the party has 489,000 members. We noticed that it's lost approximately 23,000 members since the February NEC, and that includes 7,000 of which are in their 20s. That is not a good sign. We're concerned about that. The party needs to do more to retain our members. We asked how about restoring the whip to Jeremy Corbyn. After 4 NEC members asked this on 4 separate occasions, We were told that this is a matter between the Chief Whip and Jeremy Corbyn. So if anybody has any questions to ask, it's the Chief Whip you need to ask. Regarding online meetings, as Ellen said, the NEC agreed that meetings will remain online until July the 31st at the earliest. And regarding annual conference, Labour Party annual conference is obviously due to go ahead in person, fingers crossed. We're all well and we're able to attend that from the 25th to the 29th of September in Brighton, unless the pandemic rears its head again and forces it to be either delayed or moved. So we're going ahead on the 25th to 29th of September for conference. Regarding National Women's Conference is going to be held online from the 25th to the 26th of June. And standing orders and a code of conduct for that conference were discussed at the NEC meeting. Gemma Bolton worked with trade union colleagues to secure some amendments to the standing orders and the code of conduct. And I'm sure all our sister comrades are looking forward to this conference, despite it not being taken place in person. We discussed a paper about single authority mayors and the selection process. The paper proposed that there was a sitting Labour mayor, 50% of party branches or the affiliate branches would have to indicate a desire to move to an open selection contest. I moved an amendment to that paper on the mayoral selections to ensure that this was reduced to a third of party branches and affiliated branches to bring it in line with parliamentary selections, which was introduced by the 2018 Democracy Review. This amendment fell. I think that's a step back for party democracy, in my opinion. If PLP trigger ballots are set at 1/3, why shouldn't the mayorals be? I also moved an amendment to ensure that candidates are not removed just by the General Secretary and Regional Directors, but it comes back to the NEC organisational subcommittee as well. This amendment was voted on and it ended in a 15-15 tie, but then on the recount was defeated 16-14. Now that was very close. It gives us hope that on issues of fairness, on issues of democracy and transparency, we could probably succeed in the future if we continue to work hard and collegiately, because there are people on the NEC who do not vote factionally, and I trust they will vote for democracy and transparency. I'm confident we can and are winning over those members on the NEC, and I think going forward, this is definitely an improvement we need to work on. My comrade and colleague Nadia Jama presented the motion on electing the leader of the Sheffield Labour Group, calling for members in Sheffield to elect the leader of the group, following an open letter to the NEC from Sheffield party members. There is provision in the rule book for the NEC to pilot this, so we were happy to support this motion, but unfortunately it did not pass. This could have been a fantastic opportunity to open up the election of a local leadership of Labour in local government to grassroots members, but unfortunately not this time. I'm sure we'll try again and again. There's a future candidates programme, that paper that came up. Now, this concerned us a bit because we're all slightly blindsided by the programme. It came out of nowhere really until it appeared in the papers. And basically it's a cohort of 360 future candidates for the party. So we're assuming these are parliamentary candidates and maybe even local government candidates as well. And we had a number of concerns and asked questions such as how the party was funding the programme, what the budget was. 360 places in a cohort is much bigger than the likes of the Bernie Grant or the Joe Cox leadership programmes, which roughly have an allocation of 50 per training session. So we were asked also about what about the party delivering programmes for the disabled members, for LGBT members and other liberation strands, instead of just duplicating those current programmes that already exist. So we also asked how the candidates, the future candidate programmes candidates will be selected, what the criteria is for selecting future candidates. We also asked where the NEC have an oversight on it, whether they are able, whether the unions are involved in selecting candidates for the future candidates program. And also we asked about who will be training these candidates as well. So we were assured that these things will be taken into account and there'll sure be more discussions about this. And the last thing, I'm sure everybody agrees, is that the last thing that we want is more brill-creamed robotic suits who got their politics from binge watching The West Wing representing us. I mean, we need people embroiled in our communities to represent our communities. So I think all in all, it was much positive meeting than before. There was a lot less hostility. We were able to get our questions through, get some answers, not as much answers as before, and we came close to actually winning a vote as well. And I'm sure there's improvements to be made there. And if we will continue, and we NEC members will continue to press the important questions and also represent yourselves and be your voice on the NEC. So thanks for listening, and back to you, Rachel, if there's any questions.
Thank you so much to Mish. Thank you so much to Ellen. Thank you for being such fantastic representatives on the NEC. It's not easy. Yeah, it's not easy on the NEC, particularly when we're often in a minority. And thank you so much for Ellen, who's been such, the first ever disabled representative on the NEC and has been doing such a fantastic job, basically. Some promising things from Mish about the meeting on Tuesday being a little bit more collegiate and winning some people over with our arguments. That's really bodes well for the future. I'm going to go for some questions now. There's one from the chair of Ashley Labour, and it's a question about how to put a motion to conference to enable families of learning disabled to be allowed to advocate for those with severe impairments. I think I can answer that in the sense that CLPs have got between now and September the 13th to submit a motion, basically. So you could submit that any time between now and September the 13th, but you can only submit one motion or one rule change. So you would need to convince your constituency to do that. Some CLPs have already submitted a rule change, but in many cases it'll be coming. I've got some other questions which I think are for Ellen, so we're going to go back to you in about a minute. The first one is basically, what should we push for in terms of welfare policy as the left, following on from your discussion? That's a bigger political question. And then the second one, which is about how disabled party members can get selected as candidates, particularly as local councillors, because it's often extremely inaccessible. And you've covered that a little bit with the Sheffield pilot. But if you've got anything else you can say on how that can be approved. And then a final question, which is about disabled officers potentially being suspended or expelled wrongly or unfairly in the kind of crackdown that we've seen in the last several months. So, Ellen, do you want to come in and answer some of those?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Rachel. So the first question about welfare policy, I think, at least in terms of how policy making in the party is at the moment, I think it's not really fit for purpose. And I'm definitely strongly supportive of the principles of co-production, and in the disabled people's movement, we always say nothing about us without us. And I've definitely been willing to keep an open mind. There's been some positive work led by Vicky Foxcroft, the Shadow Minister for Disabled People. But at the moment, Labour's policy making has really, I think it's kind of light touch work. It's not proper consultation. It's designed to satisfy what are seen as stakeholders without disabled people having a kind of a clear impact in it. And I said during my election that I wanted to change that. And I think I'm biased here. But in terms of a model to look at, the Commission on Social Security is something that I've been part of the past few years, and it is entirely benefit claimant led, with the aim of creating a system that actually works for those of us who rely on it. So I'm really hoping that once we've published our work, that Labour looks to some of our ideas, as well as the kind of principle and model of working with ideas coming from the bottom up. And the next question was about disabled candidates, wasn't it? So just firstly to say that I do really sympathise. I haven't stood as a candidate myself, but having heard from lots of other candidates through their experiences, I think what we put people through when selecting candidates is not great and really needs to be improved. And at the most recent NEC meeting, I did raise this in connection with the new Future Candidates programme, asking that we have a guarantee for funding access needs. And that was accepted. But there's much more that we need to do. I think the process for disabled candidates needs to be much more supportive and appreciative of how our members give time and energy and try and bring people in rather than exclude them. And just to say, when it comes more generally looking at the bigger picture, I have also repeatedly raised the closure of the access to elected office funds at various NEC meetings. And that it was a lifeline for disabled candidates who are standing. So I think Labour needs to be much louder in opposing that closure and getting it reopened as soon as possible. And what was the last question, Rachel?
So the last question was about disabled CLP officers getting suspended or expelled kind of unfairly, potentially being targeted by the disciplinary processes.
So Mish and I would get into probably quite a lot of trouble if we commented on any individual cases. We are repeatedly told how things need to be confidential and how we can't comment on some things. But to talk a little bit more generally about the process, I think it's clear that mistakes have been made over the past year in terms of how the party issues suspensions. And we have had reports of CLP officers having their suspensions lifted after they've looked into the detail, which is good. My best advice at the moment is that although we can't get into individual cases, if you do have concerns about the process, please do get in touch with us as NEC members, and we'll be happy to raise any issues with governance and legal unit. And just to say, the upcoming work on a code of conduct on disablism, I think will be really important to make sure that we have something solid there as well.
Thanks, Ellen. A couple more coming in. I think one's just a clarification. Can you clarify, are you saying that at the moment, CLP disability coordinators or the head of the branch, they cannot ask the CLP secretary for the list of self-identified disabled members because that data doesn't have those permissions? Is that what you were saying previously?
Yeah, so as far as I understand it at the moment, if you completed the survey that said you are a disabled person, that information cannot be passed on at a local level. However, if your CLP has collected that data at a local level, then you might have it, but that's generally very unusual.
Thanks, Ellen. Got another broader question. What policies regarding mental health issues should the Labour Party promote?
I think policies should be designed by members and not me. So I think that's definitely something that should come up through all the various channels, through motions. That's up for members to decide.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ellen. Other questions? I'm going to throw one potentially to Mish. Hasn't had any questions yet, but you might have thoughts on it. We'll start off with Mish, which is about this high quality candidates paper, which was passed a few months ago. So that this was a paper that we were quite concerned about because it seemed to have the potential to justify excluding candidates for very limited basis. Do we have any kind of more information on how that new guidance is being used?
Good question, Rachel. I thought I was going to get away with it. Ellen was taking all the questions, but you landed me with one. I think the high quality candidates, we've asked for this. I've asked for a report back on when it's been used and how it's been used on, and how many people it's been used on how many times. I'm expecting a report on paper on this in the next NEC org subcommittee meeting, which is on the 8th of June. I have requested the party for this, and I'm hoping for a report back on this. I have been told that it's been used 4 times. I need more details of where and what. So I will report back without reporting specifics of specific cases when we hear the kinds of cases that it might have been or what we are allowed to disclose. Obviously, we will disclose.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mish. I've got another question for Ellen, I think, or maybe which is it likely that the party will support CLPs to hold hybrid meetings, especially concerned about access to voting if not in physical attendance?
So the amendment that I put in to, so it was a very short paper that was presented to us at the Tuesday NEC meeting. I asked for an amendment to be put in so that we could secure our rights to remote participation, so that any gains that were made that were positive for some disabled members wouldn't be lost if we opened up and, you know, things went back to normal. But I also put in a guarantee that we will explore, or the General Secretary will, and that's written in there, explore hybrid meetings and the feasibility of that, because it's something that has widespread support. I talked to NEC members from all across the NEC, and I've spoken to so many members, and there is generally a huge appetite to have hybrid meetings, because obviously online meetings, they're not perfect and they don't work for everyone, but it is something that the work needs to begin on. That we really have to develop some kind of understanding of how it can work in practice, and anticipate any costs or barriers that might come with that, because there are some difficulties that would come up with that, you know, like connection to internet in a small church hall or something like that. But it's not an insurmountable barrier. It's just something we really need to look into. So that's guaranteed to happen. And they said that they would work with me and other NEC members to look into that. So from my perspective, it's something that I'm going to fight for very hard. There, just to say, I think in terms of, to directly answer, in terms of likelihood, I would like it to be the case that hybrid meetings happen. But I think there is some slight resistance to those who would be in charge of overseeing it. So just to be very frank about that.
Thanks, Ellen. That's brilliant. We've got another couple of questions. What funding is available for members living with a disability in CLPs, or access to funding for disabled party members?
So that was one of my first kind of questions when I did have a meeting with David Evans, the General Secretary, and when I came into the role, I really wanted a clear answer on who is supposed to pay for access costs, and that is something that just has never been worked out. So often it's down to the CLP to provide any support to meet any access costs, but that can also be put on the region. But really, I think it's clear that there should be some national support to ensure that if your CLP doesn't have any funding, that that can definitely be covered. And so we did look at getting a more centralized access fund in place. And that's something I'm working through with David Evans on looking into that. I get a lot of answers about how it's going to be looked into, but it is something I'm absolutely going to persevere with because I think it's really important. But just to say that in terms of funding that exists in the party, I'm not sure that there's a lot of money in the party at the moment, but one place where there is money is where members' money goes, and that is the development fund. So just to make members aware as well, that if there were bigger things that you wanted to do in terms of accessibility, so say, you know, like a technology, or you wanted to improve, you know, make step-free access where you normally hold, the venue normally hold CLP meetings, you can apply to that fund to pay for things like that. And I'm sit on that panel. I'm chair of that panel that looks over those bids. So I really encourage you to put in applications for those kind of accessibility costs there, because there have been some really good ones come in recently that the party has approved. So it's definitely possible.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to Ellen. I've put your email in the chat so people can follow up with Ellen about additional questions. We've almost got to our end of the time. I'm just posting Mish's email as well so that party members can keep following up on them. I guess I'm going to take it back to just Mish and Ellen, if you've got any, I don't know, just like a final minute, just to kind of like sum up, you know, to sum up. Should we start with, start with yourself, Helen?
I think I've waffled on quite a lot in this meeting. So I think I will just say that for anyone who may not be feeling all that positive about things in the party at the moment, whatever the reason may be, is just to say that on the horizon, we do have the disabled member structures coming. And I think that is the most exciting, positive thing to come about for disabled members in a while, to have that autonomous space for us to self-organize, to have our own structures embedded inside the party, I think is hugely important. So if you're looking for something to look out for and to be positive about, I think it's that coming on the horizon.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ellen. Mish, final.
Yeah, I think, as Ellen said, there's a lot of positives to look forward to. The community organising unit finished yesterday, but that doesn't mean that community organising within ourselves cannot continue. Although the party might not be able to show it, there's plenty of community wealth building projects that we can do in our own communities, either used through our CLPs or through our branches, or with the help of local momentum groups. I think it's also important that we look forward to conference, we get those motions in your CLPs, and we also build towards the future, because at the end of the day, the party is ours, we are the members, and without members and membership subscriptions, the party will struggle, and definitely with the number of members that have left, the party is feeling the pinch financially. We need to carry on with our activism, we need to carry on within the party, and we also need to build what we believe, and that's a better and fair society. And I'm sure the Labour Party will succumb to our vision as well.
Thank you so much, Mish, and thanks once again to Mish and Ellen for being such fantastic representatives on the National Executive Committee. We're wrapping up now. We have recorded this call, so we'll put the recording on the website. We will also make the transcript available as well, so people can refer back to it, and you can show that to other people who are unable to attend. The next NEC meeting is in July, I think. So we'll have another of these calls then, although in the meantime, there will be committee meetings. So I think the NEC representatives will do written reports from those. I would say key thing happening at the moment is election of conference delegates. There's AGMs, there's a lot of votes and things like that. Election of conference delegates, I would say, is like a very high priority. It's very important to get as many socialist delegates as possible elected to go to party conference, and to make sure that we can promote left-wing policies, but also, as importantly, prevent any changes to the constitution that would undermine democracy in the Labour Party. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming on this call. I hope you found it useful, and I hope you have a lovely afternoon and a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.